Good evening. At this time, I'd like to call to order the Planning Commission meeting of January 13th, 2020. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the secretary please call the roll?
Commissioner Buss?
Present.
Commissioner Cohan?
Here.
Commissioner Lanson?
Here.
Commissioner Newman?
Here.
Chair McMahon?
Here. Item number 4, are there any written comments, announcements, or continuances at this time?
Yes, Chair. There is a supplemental packet this evening that relates to item 8A on the agenda. It includes additional pages that were omitted from one of the attachments for that particular item.
Thank you. Item number 5 is public comments. Now is the time for public comment. At this time, any person may address the commission regarding a city planning matter that is not on the evening's agenda. Should the commission wish to discuss an issue raised by a member of the public, the issue will be referred to staff for scheduling on a future agenda. Anyone who'd like to speak under public comments must complete a speaker card and file it with the recording secretary before the public comments portion of the agenda is called. The speaker's remarks should be addressed to the commission as a whole and not to an individual commissioner or staff member. Unless otherwise provided by the commission, speakers are limited to 5 minutes. The monitor in front of you will show you the remaining time you have. It doesn't appear that we have any speaker cards for public comments. Okay. Next, we have the consent calendar with the minutes of November 18th, 2019. Do any of my fellow commissioners have any comments or a motion to approve the minutes? Commissioner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move to approve the minutes.
Will the secretary please prepare us for a vote?
Motion carries 5-0. Sorry, Buss, yes. Yes, okay. 5-0.
Okay, item number 7 is new business, which at this time we will have Deputy Community Development Director Kelvin Parker open nominations for chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, I would like to open nominations for Planning Commissioner Chair for the 2020 calendar year. Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Parker. And before I make my nomination, I want to thank Chair McMahon for her service this year. We've had some controversial cases, and I commend you for doing an excellent job of keeping the conversation civil and informed at all times. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
With that, we've also had a vice chair who's served ably through the year, and I'm glad to nominate Commissioner Lanson to be the chair for the coming year.
Commissioner Lanson. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, the nominations are now closed. And with that, would the secretary please prepare us for a vote?
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. And with that, we'll change seats here briefly. Please bear with us, public, as we go through that and change our name tags. It'll just take a moment.
I need to change the chair.
While we're in the process of changing names, I wanted to share Commissioner Newman's comments. Commissioner McMahon has done a fantastic job this last year with graciousness and kindness and an indication of the decades of service she's had to our city. So thank you so much for leading us, and know that we very much appreciate all you've done for the city and all you'll keep doing.
Thank you very much.
So with that, we will go to item 8, which is a public hearing. Madam Oh, I'm sorry. We will not do that. We're going to actually go back and open nominations for vice chair for the year 2020. Do I have any nominations? Commissioner McMahon?
Yes, I would like to nominate Commissioner Buss for the role of vice chair.
Do we have any other nominations? All right, nominations are closed. Madam Chair, please prepare us for a vote.
Motion carries 5-0.
Just as a quick comment, does it matter that mine is hers and hers is mine in terms of our screens?
We should change last time.
Not that I don't mind being confused with the amazing Commissioner McMahon.
You'll need that
We were supposed to do that, and I forgot. Sorry.
It's okay.
Congratulations, Vice Chair Buss. I know you'll do a fantastic job this year, especially when I'm not around, if that happens.
Thank you, sir.
Now we move on. Moving on to item 8, public hearing. As soon as she gets done putting the nameplate in.
Okay.
Okay, item 8, the public hearing. Please open the public hearing.
Hearing having been advertised as required by law is hereby open to consider agenda item 8A, oak tree removal number OTP 2019-70254, to allow the removal of one coast live oak tree, approximately 30-inch trunk diameter, causing damage to private property, to an existing single-family dwelling located at 516 Timberwood Avenue. The applicant is Chuck Shapiro.
Thank you. So we have, who is it you said is presenting?
Steve Berrigan
That's what I
from the
thought,
Planning
Steve
Division.
Berrigan. All right, thank you. Mr. Berrigan, go ahead.
Good evening, Chair Lanson and members of the Commission. For your consideration tonight, an oak tree permit application has been filed to allow the removal of one mature coast live oak tree, approximately 30 inches in trunk diameter, causing damage to private property located at 516 Timberwood Avenue. If you take a look at the PowerPoint, this is the project location within the Wildwood area, south of Wildwood Avenue, off of Avenida de los Arboles, near Wildflower Park. Planning Commission approval for this application is required because this involves the removal of an oak tree with a trunk diameter of greater than 24 inches. As mentioned, the trunk diameter for this particular tree is 30 inches. The project site is approximately 5,850 square feet in area and built in 1990. The original landscape plan intended a cherry plum tree to be planted within the front yard area. However, the developer planted a coast live oak. The tree has overgrown its current location at 30 inches in diameter. Oak tree removal can be granted if specific criteria are met, including if the tree is creating substantial property damage or if damage caused by the tree cannot be controlled or reasonably remedied. The tree currently stands at 50 feet high with a 45-foot crown. The trunk is approximately 15 feet from the home, and the roots are growing underneath the driveway and the foundation. Branches and roots have interfered with the public right-of-way. This is a front view of the home, and you can see the oak tree on the left. If you look towards the garage door, there is a portion of driveway abutting the house that demonstrates the roots intrusion. Notice the proximity to the public right-of-way. The roots have grown underneath the driveway adjacent to the foundation. This area was previously mentioned, the previously mentioned area of the driveway which abuts the garage. The city consultant agrees that the tree is causing property damage. He recommends root pruning and root barriers to mitigate root intrusion. However, it likely needs to be replaced every 5 years, if it works. This may cause negative impact on the tree, resulting in tree failure. The applicant has agreed to donate an amount equivalent to the cost of a 15-gallon oak tree to the Conejo Park and Recs District. Additionally, after speaking to Mr. Wilson, our certified arborist and the municipal specialist, we believe there are new tree pallets better suited for the replacement tree in the front location. Therefore, we are recommending to modify condition number 4. For environmental review, this project is a Class 4 exemption. The tree is not considered a designated scenic resource or located in a scenic resource area. And the city's oak tree preservation and protection guidelines requires a replacement tree or a donation equivalent to, as stated previously, which mitigates tree removal, which the applicant has agreed to. There are no reasonable mitigation measures that can be implemented to prevent this tree from continuing to damage the dwelling and the public right-of-way. The documentation and evidence demonstrates that the tree is causing damage and will likely continue to cause damage to the dwelling and public right-of-way. Staff is recommending that the Planning Commission approve this project based on the findings in the staff report and subject to conditions of approval with the modification of number 4. And as mentioned, Mr. Wilson, our certified arborist and municipal specialist, believes there are new tree pallets better suited for the proposed location. Therefore, we are recommending the language you see on the PowerPoint. Staff, including Mr. Wilson and Kari Finley, Planning Division Manager, and myself, are available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Berrigan. Commissioners, questions? Okay.
Thank you, Chair Lanson. And thank you, Mr. Berrigan, for your presentation. The Thousand Oaks Municipal Code gives property owners the right to take down trees when there's no alternative, when to what the law says is there's reasonable and conforming use of the land, and the tree is preventing that reasonable and conforming use. My reading of the report that you prepared for us this evening is that that's essentially the test we're applying here. My question is there any other test before us than the reasonable and conforming test, or is that it? Is that the crux of this case?
Correct.
It is essentially a reasonable and conforming test.
Yes.
Okay. The staff packet also included 2 reports, one from the applicant's arborist and one from the city's arborist. And as you mentioned, the city's arborist, the applicant's arborist concluded reluctantly that the tree had to come down. that was the best outcome. The city's arborist drew a different conclusion in the report and said it does not have to come down. There are some measures that might work if it was kept in place. But the city still concluded that the tree should come down. So I'm wondering what went into the decision to draw a different conclusion than was presented in the city arborist report.
The mitigation to prevent root intrusion had to be a reasonable measure. So it had to be something that the applicant, that was reasonable to both the applicant and the city.
And both the city and the applicant felt that those mitigation measures were not reasonable. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I know we've been through this before, but there's a question about replacement ratios. And I apologize that I'm bringing this up again, but for the benefit of anyone listening on TOTV, we have some cases where the recommendation is to replace any oak tree or protected tree that's removed at a 3-to-1 ratio. And what's proposed this evening is a 1-to-1 ratio. And can you just quickly explain where 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 ratios apply and where 1-to-1 ratios do?
The 3-to-1 ratio was more of a mitigation with regards to like a commercial property. In this case, the applicant's a homeowner. He doesn't have very much of a commercial budget. However, also we did take into consideration that the original landscape plan had called for a cherry plum tree to be planted in the gentleman's front yard.
And that actually, thank you for clarifying the commercial residential split in policy. But the enforcement question is my final question. It seems to me, in reading the case, that if there had been enforcement years ago, because this staff report does say that originally some other tree was specified for this property. It's not the fault of anyone in this room. I'm not pointing fingers in any way. But it seems to me that if there had been enforcement of that original condition, we wouldn't be here tonight. Because an oak tree was never specified, and certainly not so close to a house. So going forward, is there some enforcement mechanism for this case and for other cases to prevent this kind of thing from happening again?
With regards to that type of enforcement, at the end of, with regards to each track that is constructed or a new home or commercial facility, what we have is a landscape plan check. So the applicant gives us an idea of what he wants to do. We take a look at the plan, we approve it. Once it's approved, they have to build it per that specification. Once that project is built through and the landscaping is installed, there's a landscape certification process that we have to undergo, and it actually has to be certified by their landscape architect as well as our city consultant.
Okay. And I take it that those sets of safeguards came into practice sometime after this oak tree was planted. Is that a safe assumption?
They've been in place. However, they're a little bit more monitored.
Okay. Well, I mean, a little bit more. It's a binary thing. There was a plan that it was approved. It did say to use a different tree, not an oak tree, and then that didn't happen. So I'm just looking for some assurance
Commissioner,
regulatory-wise, that
It-
going forward, there is some sort of enforcement.
that is correct. And excuse me for, I didn't intend to cut you off with that.
Not at all.
But that is correct. This current process that Steve mentioned is specifically designed to help with issues such as this. And it's more of a modern process, and that was not in effect it was not in effect at the time of the original planting.
That's an important distinction. So
And
thank you for
If I
that.
may, Chair, and Commissioner Newman, you make these great points, and we certainly appreciate your comments. When we look at the policy, and as you probably are aware, when we had that latest rendition of this section of this whole oak tree ordinance section, and we're again ensuring that we're maintaining the purpose of what we trying to preserve the oak trees. But then we have this kind of situation where, as you noted, 30 years ago, 35 years ago, there was a tree planted that wasn't part of the landscape plan. And I'm not going to speak about that time period since I wasn't here either, other than there's probably much more volume of homes coming in and probably resources weren't checked, but obviously this was missed. And the repercussions are similar to when, the repercussions we have, of course, is now we're 30 years later and this tree has grown and it's an oak tree. And so we all understand the density of that and what that can mean. We have our city arborist and our municipal arborist, Kevin Wilson, on the dais tonight. And I'm sure if you wanted to ask him, we talk about how we change our tree palettes for our city now and why we do that. And one of the reasons why is because we learned from the past of some of the trees that we thought were beautiful and fantastic that were planted 30, 40, 50 years ago. Now that we see them, it's not that they've lost any of that beauty, any of that luster, other than the fact that now we know we shouldn't be planting them in certain locations, right? Locations close to public right-of-way, for example, or close to structures because of what happens later on. And also with the idea that we have the drought and we have the years of we don't have drought, and then we have the years of drought and that stress that it puts on the tree and then their need to survive and what happens with those actions, we come into a situation like this. And so, again, I think staff's recommendation is partly based on looking at the purpose and the meaning of the ordinance section. And as you noted, if you look at the administrative decision for example, the CDD director, when he has to decide the replacement ratio, right, you have to look at the circumstances, and that's what you're doing tonight too. And that's why the code says the body that's making the decision has to look at the circumstances. And we felt that based on all these the totality of the circumstances, we felt that, or staff felt that this was an appropriate 1-to-1 ratio. I think Mr. Berrigan also mentioned that the condition of replacing it with the same tree. You can ask Mr. Wilson, he's much more qualified than I am, but we decided after talking to him that the recommendation would be to have him replace a tree that would be, or the recommendation is to replace a tree with something that's appropriate based on CDD decision. Because Mr. Wilson can say the cherry plum tree that was from 1990 is not in our tree palette today, and it probably doesn't make sense for us to be advising to put one in there that's no longer in our tree palette. So we want to be consistent with that, and that's why there was a change to condition number 4.
I appreciate your walking us through that. I'm glad to hear there is a more modern regulatory and enforcement framework in place. And I'm glad, especially since we have in the past, Mr. Wilson, reviewed the pallets that you've helped prepare, that we're actually using those pallets today. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, I'd like to point out that the forestry master plan that was utilized back in 1990 was adopted, I believe, in 1989. And there wasn't a lot of knowledge at that time about the right tree in the right location. At that time, the philosophy was to plant a lot of big trees throughout the city. And now, 30 years after the fact, we've realized that planting big trees is great, but it's not always the best thing when you're planting next to infrastructure. And so now our philosophy is the right tree for the right location. And that's why we updated the forestry master plan last year. And so we have a pretty comprehensive palette that the applicant can select from, and it would work wonderfully on that street in that location. It's just unfortunate that that's a beautiful tree, but it's the wrong tree for that location. It is doing damage.
And thank you for updating the palette to be more appropriate. Appreciate that. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Newman. Any other questions, commissioners? Commissioner McMahon?
I just have one question. I went and I looked at the trench, and there's a lot of roots right at the surface in the trench. Do we have any idea of how deep those roots go right there?
I'm probably best suited to answer that question. When you have development and the lots are graded, they're compacted and the soils are compressed. And it's unfortunate that due to that compression, tree roots really only can thrive in the upper 2 feet of soil. It's just because once the soils are compressed, the roots can't carry on a gas exchange at deeper levels. So you will see a lot of surface rooting in an urban environment. The exception is when you have utility lines that are trenched in after the compaction has taken place for such things as water lines or wastewater lines. Roots are opportunistic. They grow out in it like the spokes of a bicycle. And so if they run into a trench, they'll follow that trench for as long as they possibly can. But and they will grow deep. But if there's nothing, no trench there, or the soils haven't been loosened up through mechanical means, the compaction will force those roots to grow in the upper 2 to 3 feet of soil.
Thank you. That's all.
Any other questions, commissioners? Commissioner Buss?
I've got one quick question as well. I went out and looked at the property, and so I'm guessing we've got roughly about 20, 25 feet of front yard there. And we're asking them to remove, if they remove that tree, to grind down the stump and plant a new tree there. I just want to make sure that we're all in agreement that a tree makes sense there, considering the size of that front area and what we do have underground as far as public right-of-way and utilities.
So I think for that location, our biggest concern would be the wastewater lateral because it's fairly close to the existing tree. That said, the materials are PVC, and so a smaller size tree really shouldn't impact the sewer lateral. There's a lot of trees that are available that are noted in the updated forestry master plan that would be suitable for a yard of that size. It could be anything from a crepe myrtle to a strawberry tree to a Chinese pistache to a Bradford pear. There's a fairly good selection that they can choose from.
And at full maturity, they won't be an issue.
No, sir.
Any other commissioner comments? Commissioner Cohen?
Just a quick question regarding the mitigation tree. Has a site been identified at a local park nearby the project site?
Typically, as the condition reads, we have them donate money to CRPD, and then they determine where it's most likely to be needed and what the appropriate location is.
Thank you.
With no further questions, I'll just have actually just a few. First of all, did you receive any comment, objection, anything from any of the neighbors?
No. No comments or correspondence was received.
Okay, and I'll confirm with the applicant, but I want to make sure that your understanding is they approved the modified condition 4 that's on the screen here?
Correct.
Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, with that, we will go to the applicant, Charles Shapiro. Oh, 1 second. Oh, okay, that's just the other thing. All right. We'll go to the applicant. You'll have 15 minutes. Can you please come to the podium, which you've already done. Please state your name and the city of residence for the record.
Want to put that on presentation mode? Look bigger? Yeah. Excellent. Well, at first, I'd just like to thank you. Excellent questions. I've been in the facilities management business at Lockheed for 40 years, so I'm a little familiar. Never had the opportunity to sit in a hearing like this, and if they're run like this, then we're in good shape. I think this is a very strong case. I was advised that I need to speak. I'm happy to do so. It's not going to take 15 minutes. I don't know if there's any football fans here, but Tigers, and I hope to get back soon. You saw the pictures, those two pictures up on top. I think the important thing is on the bottom right, it doesn't really show the size of those roots. One of those roots is this big. And this all started with that center picture with the driveway right butting up against our garage door coming up. And it's clear that Steve and Kari, Mr. Parker, very supportive through this process. It's been a long process, so it's taken a year, a little over a year. And originally I had to prove to y'all that it was the tree. And it's taken about $3,000 of our time, of our money to do so, to prove that. In arborists, in funds to the city, and removal of that swath. My wife and I love trees, and we're sad to take this down. And I believe all your questions were grounded in that type of philosophy. So, thank you. We understand that there is a migrating bird federal law, and we may have to take this tree out prior to February 1st in order to avoid that law. So we are spring-loaded and ready to go. I understand there's a 10-day period of repeal. So if today's the 13th, between the 23rd and the 31st is our period. So we plan to meet that. My wife and I lived in Santa Clarita for 25 years. I always like to take the positive side. We love Thousand Oaks. And we're going to live here for the rest of our days in that home. And it wasn't the fact that it should have been a flowering plum that really made me passionate about this. What made me passionate was that if I'm fortunate to live 25 years, I think my wife will live to be 100. If I'm fortunate to live and be with her, I don't want to be sitting in my chair looking out that window worrying every day about that tree and the cost. And I certainly didn't want to worry about her being here in her 80s and 90s, having to worry about that tree. So, next slide, please. So with that little cartoon on the left, hopefully we can get to that age. And just a big thank you. Just a really big, from the bottom of our hearts. I would have liked to have seen maybe some funding from the city to pay for some of this, because it's going to be 15, 20, depends on how much we want to spend on landscaping, obviously. But we have to re-landscape, to replace the concrete, and all the other sunk costs we've already done. But I've been advised that that's not possible. So we will move forward and continue to make our little home beautiful. So that's what I have. Go Tigers.
Mr. Shapiro, I noticed there was another speaker card submitted by Mrs. Shapiro. Did you wish to say anything, or? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Shapiro. If there's other questions, we may bring you back, but thank you.
Thank you very much.
I have 6 written statement cards in favor of the application, and I have 1 additional speaker card I just received. Actually, I'll read the comments here. We'll go to public comments. Anybody here will have to fill out a speaker card if you'd like to say something about the project under consideration. Public speakers will have 5 minutes each. Please state the name, your name and the city of residence when you come up and speak. We have, again, 1 speaker card from Lily Abercrombie, I believe. Yes, come up to the podium there and please state your name and city of residence. And again, the name is basically to make sure that I got the pronunciation correct.
Good evening. My name is Lily Abercrombie. I've been a resident of Thousand Oaks for ever and ever since I landed in California. And I'm here in support of our neighbors, and not just the Shapiro family, but all of our neighbors. Because no one wants to live in a concrete land, right? At the same time, we have to be careful with the trees that are next to our property because it's scary for any of us. So I'm really supported. I live next door to them. We walk our puppies. We know how important it is. So I strongly support, because we don't want the properties of Thousand Oaks to be devaluated. If there's an oak tree, what are we going to do with our city, right? We want to make sure our city stays financially stable and our residents are stable. So I'm just here supporting my neighbor to please, I just heard the good news, to please remove the tree. That will be for the safety of everyone. That's all. Simple.
Thank you.
Thank you, too.
One thing, Mr. Shapiro, if you could please come back up to the podium for a second. And could you please, to Bergen, put back modified number 4? I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. There was a modification to condition number 4 with regard to the tree replacement, and I just want to make sure that you were in agreement with that modification.
Steve called me and told me, you should know that you can't.
Oh, sorry about that.
Have him go back to the podium, and then we can read it. You go back to the podium, and we'll read it. We'll read it verbatim.
Yeah, I can read it to you. So modified condition 4 says tree removal mitigation. Prior to the removal of the subject oak tree, the applicant shall provide a donation equivalent to the cost of a 15-gallon oak tree to the Caneo Recreation and Park District in order to comply with the city oak tree ordinance. Additionally, and here's where the modification is, additionally, the applicant will be required to plant an appropriate on-site replacement tree approved by the Community Development Department within the front yard area.
Yes. I believe, is Mr. Wilson, is that? Yeah, I believe if you take my call, I'll be calling Mr. Wilson to get his idea of what.
But is that condition acceptable to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that there was no misunderstanding. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll go back to staff if there's any additional comments.
Staff has no additional comments at this time.
Commissioners, any further questions? At this point, we will go ahead and close the public hearing, and I'll open the floor to commissioners for comments or a vote. Commissioner Newman? I'm sorry, we actually have already closed the public hearing. You have to wait until after the hearing. You can ask the questions of staff. Commissioner Newman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Shapiro, thank you very much for coming. Thank you to the neighbors for coming, participating in this process. I'm delighted to hear such unanimity and support in the community. I'm delighted to hear everyone agree with something that Mr. Shapiro said. I think you really hit the nail on the head when he said, "My wife and I love trees, and we're sad to take this down." No one here is saying this is a great thing that we're ripping out a 40, 50-year-old oak tree. No one's happy about that, but it clearly is doing damage. It clearly never should have been planted this close to a house that would cause such damage and be so inappropriate in this setting. I hope the replacement tree grows twice as big as that in a place that's appropriate for it, and that you continue to live for many years, as you said, in your location with something that's part of the palette that Mr. Wilson and his team helped develop, and that you enjoy that for many years. So with that, I'm going to recommend that I'm going to move that we approve OTP 2019-70254 based on the findings and with the modification agreed to tonight.
And I think you need to hit the motion button just to make sure.
And one more thing. Well, I know we're not supposed to answer questions from the public since this is a closed hearing. I think your question you're asking is what kind of tree will it be? And I don't think that's determined yet. There are a range. There was a new or a revision of the palette that has different palettes for each neighborhood in the city. And that was reviewed by us and approved last year or the year before, I don't remember. But it will be something that's appropriate for your neighborhood and will not be destructive like an oak tree 3 feet from a house will be.
All right, so other commissioner comments. Commissioner Buss.
I just wanted to follow up. Thank you, Mr. Berrien, for the wonderful presentation. Mr. Shapiro, you were extremely entertaining. That was the best presentation I've seen in a long time. So I very much appreciated that, and even more, I appreciate the fact that from the public comments and from the written comments, your neighborhood's very much in agreement. They appear to love you very much, and this is the kind of neighborhood I love in Thousand Oaks, and I'm very excited to see that. So thank you very much for coming out.
Commissioner Cohen, did you have any comments? I'll just have a brief one. Looking at the tree reminded me of my teenage son who was growing to about 6'5", and trying to place him in this small little bed, and at some point kind of outgrows the process of what was intended. So I again, obviously see the absolute need for this, and I'm in favor of the motion. So with that, please, Madam Clerk, prepare us for a vote.
Motion carries 5-0.
And that is approved. In terms of the appeal period that Mr. Shapiro pointed out, any aggrieved party who wishes to appeal the Planning Commission's decision may do so by the filing of appeal with the Community Development Department within 10 days. Thank you for your patience. We will move on to item 9, Department Reports. Mr. Parker.
Thank you, Chair. There are none this meeting, excuse me.
Oh, that's it, huh? Just quick, to the point. Item 10, Commission comments and AB 1234 reports. Anybody? I just want to say one brief thank you to my fellow commissioners for supporting me in this process. I will continue to do everything I can to try to bring this process to where it was supposed to be. And again, I've had great leaders in terms of Commissioner and Chair Newman beforehand, and Commissioner Nichols, and obviously Chair McMahon. This is an amazing body and a bunch of people who really care about the city. And I'm just so proud to be part of this process. So thanks all of you for supporting me in this process. And again, thanks to my wife, Hollis, and my kids, Matthew Madison, for supporting my reconnaissance missions that I do all throughout the city. Any other comments? All right. Commissioner McMahon?
I just briefly want to thank the staff for your support of me, my first time as chair. You were so helpful, so helpful. I really appreciate everything you've done. And my fellow commissioners, you have been great. Like I said, it was my first time as chair, and it went fairly smoothly, and I think it's because of all of you. So thank you very much.
Item 11, staff update.
Thank you, Chair. Prior to tonight's evening, I passed out a notification that there will be a Planning Commissioners Institute March 4th through 6th. Staff will be reaching out to confirm attendance for those who have not attended that particular Planning Commissioner training opportunity. Additionally, we have a meeting scheduled for January 27th. There is an item that is noticed, and we're looking forward to having that meeting.
With that, we will adjourn the meeting to 6 o'clock p.m. on January 27th, 2020. Good night, Thousand Oaks.